Well, welcome, Mr. Secretary. Welcome home to Chicago. Welcome all of our friends and the Standard Club members. What a special evening it is to all come together to see the former Secretary and to talk about an amazing new book, Known and Unknown, and which chronicles one of the most amazing public lives in our nation's history. I know that a number of you were able to be out and bought a copy or two of the book in advance of the program, and possibly just on the strength of those sales, we're going to break the news. Don Rumsfeld's new book has just hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. So, congratulations. It is a truly extraordinary life that we're going to be talking about tonight. And but first, in full disclosure, I need to make a comment. I have some bias here. Over the years, I've been Secretary Rumsfeld's squash partner. And partner is actually too friendly a word for it. I was his squash opponent.
Now you're talking.
And I think it's fair to say I didn't win very many games. And I got a lot of bruises to show for it. But I was pleased to read in the book I'm not the only one. So, but that's my history. Mr. Secretary, it is great to have you here. One of the things in the book that you talk about at a couple points, which I found interesting and a little odd in some ways, where for a fellow who became a leader in Republican circles, where some of the inspiration for your going into public service came from and who it came from. Could you talk about that for a minute?
Well, sure. I look down here and I see Newt Minow is sitting. Where's Newt? There's Newt Minow. Newt knew Adelaide Stevenson, and I did not. But in my senior year in college, of course, he was governor of the state of Illinois, and he lost 2 races to Dwight Eisenhower. And in between his 2 presidential races, he spoke at Princeton in my senior year and delivered a speech that was as eloquent and elegant and elevating as any speech about public service I've ever heard. And I have a website, rumsfeld.com, where I have thousands of pages of documents that support the book that I've just written. And in it, you can get the Adelaide Stevenson speech. And if you have young people that are interested in public service, you might want to go to the website, print it out, and pass it around, because it is truly inspiring.
And I did that, and you can go and it's a...
You're not a young person.
But I know young people. I'm gonna pass it along to young people. But one of the things, talk a little bit more, because it's an extraordinary thing about this book, about the documentation that's available online on the website. And I've never seen that before. So talk a little bit about...
Well, I've never seen it either. When I left the government, I first of all decided I wouldn't write a book. And then I talked to George Shultz, and he said, look, you've lived 1/3 of the history of our country. Isn't that amazing? What a young country.
Yeah.
What an old man. Maybe both. In any event, George said, you have to do that. You've got to go ahead and have your slice of history there. And so I thought, next, maybe I'll write a book, but I'll do a quick one in a year and put it out and be done with it. And then I looked at this incredible archive I have. I have my parents' letters every day during World War II, back and forth from the Pacific to Coronado, California. I dictated a vote after every vote in Congress in the 60s, during the Civil Rights era and the Vietnam War, an important time. And every time I vote, I'd go put down in a dictation why I voted the way I voted. And then I was chief of staff and chairman of the transition for Gerald Ford, and I never kept a journal as such, and I never did a diary, but I'd go in and meet with him. The only president who was never elected president or vice president, didn't have a campaign manager, he didn't have a platform, he was an instant president. And I'd go in and lay on him 8, 10, 15 things, and then he'd give me 10, 15 things. I'd go out and dictate it, so that my assistant, this young assistant I had working for me named Dick Cheney, would take the notes, and they were never edited. I never read them again. There were misspellings all through them. But it's truly how the White House operated during that period, such a critical period when the reservoir of trust in this country had been drained. So I have all of these, and they told me I dictated 20,000 memos in the 6 years I was at the Pentagon the second time. So there it was. So I decided to spend 4 years, digitize the archive, and make the archive available on a website so that if I quote a paragraph in the book, you can go to the end note and then go to the website and pull up the entire memo. And it seemed to me that people are interested in history, they're interested in how decisions are made, and they're interested to try to have a glimpse of what government's like. And so this website is, as I say, has thousands and thousands of pages, and I hope people will take a moment and take a look at it.
And I printed out a couple of those, and we will talk about a few of them.
That scares me.
Yeah, it does. But first of all, and there's some here, people who may have been in your district. So you were elected first to Congress in
1962.
So how'd that happen?
Boy, it's better to be lucky than smart, I'll tell you that. I'd served in the Navy, and then I worked in Washington for 2 congressmen, and then I came back home and went in business with A.G. Becker and Company here in Chicago, and I think Roger Brown's here, who was my boss somewhere. Where's Roger? I think you're around. And in any event, the woman who was the congresswoman in the district had succeeded her husband, Ralph Church, and Mrs. Church decided to not run again. They had served in that district my entire life. And I thought to myself, you know, if someone gets that district, they could serve in that district for the rest of my life. You only have so many chances, so I threw my hat in the ring. There were about 15 candidates. I got a close friend, Ned Janotic, sitting back there to be campaign manager, and Art Nielsen to be chairman of the campaign. Ran, and, you know, good fortune, lots of good things happened, and I ended up winning the primary election and then the general election, and went down to Washington representing the wonderful people of the 13th District. In 1960, January of 63, I was sworn in. So I'm grateful to any of you who voted for me.
But you weren't destined to spend the rest of your years in the Congress, were you?
No, indeed.
One thing, so when you entered the Nixon administration, another thing, there were so many curiosities in this book. So to talk about the first job you had working in the Nixon administration.
I'd voted against the Office of Economic Opportunity as a congressman, and for whatever reason, Pat Moynihan knew that I'd been a big supporter of civil rights, that I'd been kind of a reformer in the Congress, trying to change the rules in the Congress to fit the 20th century. And he talked Nixon into asking me to resign from Congress and take over an agency I'd voted against. And I said no 3 or 4 times, and one day he called and invited me down to Florida and said, bring Joyce, and next thing I knew, I was director of the Office of Economic Opportunity. And I succeeded Sergeant Shriver, who passed away recently and had been the director of the office before that. So it was a big surprise to me.
And how'd that go?
Well, Joyce, one night I got home late and I looked at the icebox. A lot of people call them refrigerators, but I reached in for probably an O'Doul's or maybe even a regular beer, and there was a little note and it said, he tackled a job that couldn't be done. With a smile, he went right to it. He tackled the job that couldn't be done and couldn't do it. So
what a wonderful support from Joyce.
Yeah. I knew she was kidding.